Baumgarten. Today I have two topics on my agenda. Feel free, if you have something other than these two issues that you want to discuss, to throw them at me. The climate change conference of the world's worst polluters is underway in Washington, D.C. at the same time that a summit on the climate is being held here in New York City at the United Nations. I want to talk about that a little later as a precursor to a very special guest that we're going to have on here tomorrow to talk about global warming. But before that, there's some real interesting breaking news that is coming out of Spain. A Spanish newspaper is reporting that the Iraq War may have been avoided, that the Prime Minister of Spain, Jose Maria Aznar, conveyed to President Bush at a meeting at the Texas White House, the president's ranch in Crawford, Texas, an offer from Saddam Hussein prior to the United States-led invasion of Iraq, an offer from Saddam Hussein, who feared, despite his bravado, that he would be deposed, an offer to go into exile, but he demanded $1 billion. And rather than take up that offer from Saddam Hussein, according to the newspaper El País, obviously we know what happened. The United States invaded Iraq. At what cost? Much greater cost than the $1 billion that Saddam requested, and worse yet, greater cost in lives. People dead, people wounded, people's lives disrupted as a result of this incursion into Iraq. I don't have a lot to say one side or the other of this issue, although, 2020 hindsight is, is what we have here. Probably nobody anticipated that it would become the quagmire that it has. Probably nobody anticipated that it would be as costly as it has become. But I know that you have thoughts about this. So rather than go with my usual opening monologue, I want to open it up immediately to comments from people in the audience here on paltalk.com. So let's go, and please, no matter what your views are on this issue, we want to hear from you. Sue in New Hampshire, good to hear from you.
Hi, Gary. We can talk back and forth on this new program. That's great, because I'm sure you're going to have a few comments. First of all, this is a newspaper. I don't see the name of the journalist that's claiming this. So I'm kind of wondering about the reliability of the information. That's number one. Number two, had Saddam Hussein gone into exile, some other maniacal freak probably would have taken his place, and we'd still have the same problem. That's basically what I have to say. I actually think that the situation we have now is much better than it would be had that happened, because we'd still have the same old Iraq that Saddam was running. He would have handpicked a successor, and we'd still have a mess. Now, you may think that we have a mess now, and that, as you just said, is 2020 hindsight. There's only one mess that was worse than the one we have now, and that's the one we had while Saddam Hussein and his henchmen were still running Iraq. And I guess basically that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I don't know, Sue. I'm not so sure the situation is better today than it was prior to the invasion of Iraq. I think a lot of us are pretty weary about the situation. You're right, there would have been a vacuum. But hell, there's a vacuum now. And, if the United States pulls out, as the people of this country seem to suggest in large numbers that the U.S. ought to get out of Iraq, it's going to cause an even bigger vacuum, because we're not there to enforce whatever little stability there is, and God knows what's going to happen then. And with Saddam Hussein in place, at least there was a counterbalance to Ahmadinejad. I'm really worried about the Iranian influence now in Iraq. I'm not so sure things are better off for the world. Things may be better off for those people who were being tortured and raped and etc. by Saddam Hussein and his deported henchmen, most notably his own son. But I don't know whether the region is more stable today than it was prior to the invasion. I will say that other news media have approached the White House for comment on the story, and the White House is not denying it. Now, they're not commenting, but they're not denying, and that's usually an indication that there is a degree of veracity to the story. Otherwise, they'd have been right out there denying.
Oh, this White House never says much, Gary, about anything. I don't think that it's proof of anything if they don't deny it. But I guess that's just going to be a difference of opinion. I really do think the situation is better now than it was while Saddam Hussein was running Iraq. And we don't know what he would have done by this time had he been able to do his will in Iraq without UN sanctions. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Of course, we're all just giving our opinions out here, aren't we? We're talking about the story that appeared in a Spanish newspaper, which indicates that the President of the United States had opportunity to avoid this war if he had accepted an offer by Saddam Hussein, who feared that he would lose if there was an invasion, to go into exile. There was a $1 billion price tag given to that. That's what Saddam offered, demanded, and we apparently said no. Our next caller is Boaz. Boaz is joining us from California.
Well, you know, Gary, let's look at the situation. Saddam Hussein saying that he wanted $1 billion and that he would walk out of Iraq. Now, that probably would have saved an actual physical war. But then again, where would we go from there? Who would take his place? Let's not forget, Gary, that that Saddam Hussein had kept his regime together by a brutal dictatorship, and in doing so, who would fill that void? I think, Gary, that we would probably have ended up in the same situation, turmoil in Iraq, where we would have had to have walked into Iraq and taken control in any case, because without Saddam Hussein, there would be nobody there to keep the different factions, the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Kurds together. So I think we would really end up in the same situation, in my opinion. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Boaz. A Spanish newspaper is reporting, and the White House has at least failed to deny it, that the Iraq War could have been avoided if the United States had paid up when Saddam Hussein offered to slink away into exile for $1 billion. And as a result, the war occurred, and the cost, certainly monetarily and even more so in terms of lives lost, has been greater. So was that a good decision or a bad decision by the President of the United States? Or do you just say you don't negotiate